So we have a really exciting webinar today on adaptive cycling, and we have some guests today. The series has been hosted in conjunction with Mass Bike. So we have Galen here, and we also have Lauren, who was an intern that did a lot of work with me this past winter in terms of researching adaptive bikes and finding out about adaptive bike programs. And then we also have Karen Foster here. And I will have Galen introduce her in a moment. But Galen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks everyone for joining again. Thanks Adi for hosting and everyone at the Cambridge Community Development Department. Today we're going to talk about how to think beyond just the regular bike. We're going to think about what is out there, what are some possibilities for balance considerations, for riding side by side or tandem considerations, for figuring out modifying the bicycle to fit the adaptive needs of each individual. This is the fifth of our series. So in the past, we've talked a little bit, we touched briefly on the types of bikes back in the first and second webinar. So we're not going to touch too much on regular bikes, although we can reference them in the Q&A. But I'm more excited to talk about the kind of the universe of possibilities that's out there in bikes that you might not be aware of. So I've actually invited a partner organization that works in adaptive cycling and just adaptive recreation. This is Karen Foster, who's the executive director of All Out Adventures. I can turn it over to you in just one second, Karen, but just as a preamble, if I can pull from your bio, you've been the director there since 2007, so a good while. And you partner with the Department of Conservation and Recreation, you partner with organizations like REI to basically get out anybody and everybody who's interested in the outdoors, and cycling is a big component of that. So happy to have you talk briefly about the organization, and I'm sure you're a co-host now, so you can feel free to share a screen if you like. I can also pull up a screen of your website if that's helpful too. But Karen, I'm super happy that you can join us, and yeah, a little bit of intro about your work. Great.
And thank you for having me. All Out Adventures, we're based out in Western Massachusetts in Northampton, but we are a nonprofit organization that runs outdoor recreation programs for people of all ages and all abilities throughout Massachusetts. We head out east, we work out at Artesani Park in Brighton. We do kayaking at Lake Cochituate and Natick. We used to work at Walden Pond in Concord, you know, as well as all over the Pioneer Valley. And I say, even though our mission statement and a lot of the information and public perception of us is that we work with people who have disabilities, that's how we got our start as an organization, was to make the state parks accessible to people with disabilities. In the last, 10 to 15 years, we have really expanded our work to a point now where we consider the people we serve with our programs to be anybody that's not gonna like walk in the door of REI and rent a bike and take their own ride on the Minuteman Rail Trail, right? Like, we really think about what barriers people are facing in accessing outdoor recreation. And I promise you, we have a way to overcome whatever barrier is in front of a person who's interested in any kind of recreation. Cycling is one of the biggest things we do. And that's why we're gathered here today, is to talk about cycling and in particular concerns for seniors. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I see over and over and over again is people who say to me either, I never learned to ride a bike, or I used to love riding a bike, but now, like, when I get to a stop sign on the rail trail or I get to a red light, it's really hard for me because my balance of putting my feet down and then putting them back up to start pedaling again, that there's some challenges to the stopping and starting. I know my father-in-law will go for a ride with my kids, right? And like, he's 3 miles ahead of my kids because he can't stop and start at the intersections, or he can't stop to wait for my kids because he doesn't have the flexibility in his knees. And that's really uncomfortable. Or people who, for neurological reasons, or just, you get to a point, people will get to a point where we don't want to risk the fall. And so we have ways to work around that. One of the things that we've found the most success with seniors riding is recumbent style tricycles. And I think Galen will be able to, when Galen's talking, pull up some images. But basically, a lot of what we see are the upright, like adult-sized tricycles, upright tricycles. And I see a lot of people riding them. You can get them at Walmart. Those are really tricky because the center of gravity of the person riding is very high and they tip over. So if one of those wheels goes off the edge of the bike path, or there's a pothole, it's very, very easy for those style trikes to tip over. So we used to work with them, and then we had a couple of accidents in our programs, and we don't work with them anymore for that exact reason. So the only thing we work with now are recumbent style trikes, which people tend to think of a recumbent as being very low to the ground. And it's kind of an odd comparison, but one of the trikes we have the most success with is the same height as a standard toilet seat. And so that's what I can tell people. And then we all know, can I get up and down from a standard, and not the taller accessible toilets, but a standard toilet seat. If you can get up and down from one of those or lower, recumbent triking is for you. And even then we can put assist bars onto a trike so that it's kind of like the armrest of a chair or a couch, to have that ability to lower yourself down and grab onto the assist bars to come up. And they don't interfere with the operating of the trike. They're really easy add-on we can do. We have a lot of success, in particular with people who are stroke survivors. Very often one thing that comes with surviving a stroke is weakness on one side of the body. And so it's very easy. We can move the brake and shifter and all of the controls from one side of the trike to the other. So it can all be controlled with one hand. We just did it last week for somebody. The other thing we do is we have pedals that have straps, so we can securely attach feet to the pedals. And so then if you have one leg that will stay on the pedal and easily do the rotations, and one leg that may or may not stay on the pedal, we can securely keep feet on the pedal and allow the stronger leg to do more of the work, while the weaker leg is getting all of the range of motion and all of the exercise of pedaling. Cycling has been shown in studies to be therapeutically beneficial for people who have Parkinson's. And we see that all the time, that, you'll see there's something about the rhythm of cycling. It's similar to the rhythm of dance. It's not uncommon for us to see somebody who has Parkinson's maybe get out of their car and walk very slowly, often with a cane and a shuffle and the tremors. And their family members are looking at them like, yeah, right, you're going to take a bike ride. I'll just walk along with grandma or something. And then once we have the bike set up properly, they can take off in a way that's much more freeing than walking, and go for miles. And very often the person that's accompanying somebody to a program who thought they were going to walk alongside comes running back and is like, I need a bike too. I can't keep up with them. So there's this incredible freedom that people can find through cycling that they may not find in other activities. And I can tell you, so I've been working as a program leader at All Out Adventures since 2004. I've been the executive director since 2007. We run 180 programs a year. We serve well over 2,000 people every year. I have had one participant in that entire time that I struggled to serve well. And that's because he had severe diabetes that had led to a double leg amputation, and he was blind. And so I do have a bike that he could have gone on that has a wheelchair seat, but I didn't have one that allowed him the independence of hand cycling on a tandem. He is the only person ever I have not been able to serve. So we've had adults. Our oldest participant was 99. We've had people with severe disabilities, and everything from, like I said before, somebody who just had never learned to ride a bike when they were younger and is concerned about the balance, up to people with severe disabilities. There's a wide gamut and a wide range in which we can serve people. And then the other thing, in addition to the programs we run, we also, one of the ways we fund our programs is through the sale and service of recumbent trikes. So we have a recumbent trike shop out in Northampton, and very often help people get set up and purchase their own bike for independent riding. So that's a sort of like very quick, I promise you, yes, we can make biking possible for anybody who wants to ride. I encourage you to try it. And, we just love helping some of the troubleshooting and helping people knock down a barrier, that's something that's been preventing them from riding.
Excellent. Karen, thanks so much. That's super awesome. I'm going to share a quick screen of a slide of just essentially your logo, so for folks to just check out so you can get familiar with All Out Adventures. I have a bunch of slides that I've actually pulled some images from your website to showcase a lot of these types of trikes and bikes, so we'll get to them in a minute. You're welcome to hang out for the whole talk and then chime in if you can make it. I know you're probably very busy, but I have a question if I could ask you real fast. And then I'm also encouraging anybody who's tuning in, feel free to utilize the chat to add any questions and any thoughts as well. AD and Karen can keep an eye on that too. And anything that we can't answer in the presentation, we can always follow up with afterwards. So if there's any particular concerns or questions that you may have as audience members, please feel free to take the opportunity. Karen, I'm curious if you've seen the new technology of electric assist bicycles and electric assist tricycles play into your role. And I understand that a lot of your benefit is for mobility and for exercise. So I'm wondering where the balance is in terms of electric assist for increasing access and reducing barriers while at the same time still trying to promote physical, what's the word? Well, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I get it. And we've seen some incredible benefit of electric assist. We use in our programs, we don't necessarily use it because, well, we're getting one now that's a tandem bike with a wheelchair seat that will have an electric pedal assist. We don't typically use electric assist in our programs for a variety of reasons, but for sales we do. And it's really, really, really great. And that can be, we'll see people who maybe are concerned that they'll take a ride and then lose steam and not be able to get home. And so the electric assist can provide that confidence to them and a higher level of independence. Or we'll see people who are trying to regain strength, but don't yet have the strength to pedal far independently. And the electric assist provides that. Another, we have this couple who I adore. They got married later in life. And the wife does triathlons and the husband has a neurological condition that prevents him from cycling independently. He bought an electric assist trike so he can take bike rides with his wife. And a lot of the time it has a throttle. He's not able to pedal very much, but he uses it and then they go out cycling together. And it's just awesome to see. I run into them around town sometimes. So there's kind of this whole wide variety. And I think sometimes there can be a perception that people who are using electric assist aren't independently riding, but they are, and it can let people go further, faster, and with more confidence than they would without. And so we actually work quite a bit with electric assist, and the benefits can be huge.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that. And I'm seeing the technology expand and the price come down. So I'm seeing a lot more electric assist being integrated in with these types of adaptive cycling. One more question I have for you, and then I'll turn it over to. Part of this series that we're working with the City of Cambridge is to encourage folks to think about riding in an urban setting, in a traffic setting. And I understand that we have a lot of pathways in Boston and Cambridge for sure for people to stick to. And Northampton has the beautiful pathway system there with the Norwottic and the Mass Central Rail Trail and all the rest. I'm curious on what advice you might give for folks who are thinking about riding adaptive bikes, basically in the streets, and how that might differ and how you do your instruction.
Oh yeah, that is a great question. If you look at this picture, I adore this couple. They both have these nice tall flags on the back. Mm-hmm. And those will get to driver's eye height. And we have very big eye-catching reflective flags. Mm-hmm. And the other thing we find, so there's a bit of a mismatch between the perception of what it's like to ride a recumbent trike in an urban setting and then the reality of it. Whereas people feel vulnerable because they're a little bit lower to the ground. But one of the things we find is that drivers are pretty darn used to seeing two-wheel bikes and cutting close to them, and it's in no way a curiosity, or it doesn't often grab the attention of drivers in the way that a recumbent trike does. And so, I'll ride them around to do errands and things like that. And what I find is that a driver will turn and look, they'll give a wider berth, and they're much more likely to pay attention because it's an unusual thing for them to see. So the combination of the flag and that eye-catching sight, just, that just, it's not their everyday experience to see it, can really help. And then of course we talk to people about, using hand signals, staying, using quieter streets when possible, all of those same advice that you would give for an upright two-wheel bike, we use with recumbent trikes, but that's been our experience, as well as like triangles on the back of the seats and things to really make them show up.
Cool. Yeah, it's a great answer. I'm hearing the key thing is visibility.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Cool. Adi, is there anything else that might have come through the chat or anything else you want to cover before I jump right into examples?
Actually, are there classes which teach bike riding on city streets? Yes, usually actually the community development department and myself would teach on bike refresher courses. Because of the pandemic, we haven't been able to do that, but we're hoping that this upcoming spring that we'll be able to host some rides as well as some more structured classes. And we do this for the general community, but are hoping to also hold these workshops and clinics for older adults specifically as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to tag onto that, in prior presentations, we've invited Susan McLucas from the Bicycle Riding School up in Somerville. So if you're interested in learning how to ride as an adult, Susan's a wonderful resource. She's been doing it for over 35 years up in Somerville, and that's the Bicycle Riding School. And then we also invited John Allen from Cycling Savvy, which arguably I think he's based out of Waltham, but they run urban classes more geared for riding in traffic, riding with traffic, as traffic. So if you're already kind of advanced enough that you know how to do the riding, the hand signals, and the skill sets, Cycling Savvy is a good level 2.0 or level 3.0 for getting familiar with riding in the streets as well, along with what the Cambridge Community Development Department does, and what MassBike does as well. So we've got some pretty good resources here for you at whatever level you want to jump into. So that's a really good question.
Yeah, and feel free, try, just because you try one class and it might not work for you, or you're still not feeling confident enough, I recommend, we'll host more of these classes. So I think the more you're able to get out there, or, the better and the more confidence you'll gain. So if you're feeling nervous the first time, stick with it, is my advice.
Cool. Thanks, Adi. Excellent. Thanks, Karen. You're welcome to stick around if you've got the time. There might be something to chime into, but I understand if you've got to go because you're a busy ED as well. So
I should probably go, but I would encourage anybody to feel free to call, email. I really love talking about bikes. So I am glad for anybody participating to feel free to reach out with questions. We're happy to help, and we're here as a resource. So thank you for inviting me today.
Awesome. Well, it's a pleasure to have you, and great work you're doing out there in Northampton. And I've seen the work that you've done in Brighton at Herder Park, which is right by the Artisani Park. So more locally around here, Karen does partner with the DCR. So it's not just in Western Mass. So keep an eye out for All Out Adventures. Get on their email list if you're so inclined, and then you'll find out all the happenings that are happening throughout the state. But yeah, we got some local stuff going on with them as well.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thanks, everyone. I'm just going to barrel right on through in the interest of time. I was really appreciative that we were able to have Karen and introduce you to All Out Adventures. And welcome to the final of our 5th in the series of cycling for older adults. Again, I'm Galen Mook. I'm the executive director of MassBike. We do statewide bike advocacy. We do a lot of work with the Cambridge Community Development Department. We do youth training, adult training, mechanics training, pretty much anything and everything to get people riding, along with the advocacy that comes into bike lanes, policies, funding, and the broader picture stuff, which I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes in the city of Cambridge over the past several years. So we're very encouraged by the progress being made and are hopeful and encouraged by the progress that is yet to come. And thanks, Adi, of course. Today, we already did mention or talk about the All Out Adventures. We're mainly going to talk a little bit about the survey that Lauren here and Adi have been utilizing in order to build this webinar series. We'll talk about the types of adaptive bikes, touching a little bit on what Karen was mentioning, but then diving a little bit deeper into more varieties, scratching the surface, but really kind of diving deeper. And that's where a lot of your questions and interests might lie. And we'll talk a little bit about partner organizations and further resources to follow up with, including All Out Adventures and more. And then I'm happy to stick around for Q&A. So just to fly right in, I'm going to leave this slide up for just a second. This is the slide I have in all my presentations, but this is the reminder that the philosophy behind what I like to drive for breaking down barriers for riding are basically comfort, knowledge, and awareness. Comfort is the goal. Everything that you got to do on a bike should be comfortable. Not saying easy, but should be comfortable. So we need to modify how you're riding, where you're riding, the weather you're riding in, the bike you're riding on, the clothes you're riding in, all that sort of stuff can be modified to make you comfortable. And then comfortable also means safe generally. Knowledge is where these presentations come in, where we throw a lot of info at you. Some of it sticks, hopefully. And then awareness is kind of my catch-all bucket term to say that you have to be aware when you're out and riding. You have to be aware of your surroundings. You have to be aware of pretty much everything that's going on in the world, internally and externally, so that you can modify your riding in the moment. So with that, one more slide too. I mentioned this in a prior slide as well, as to who we are encouraging to ride and the purpose of why we're doing the infrastructure, doing the trainings, doing the education. We are gearing toward the lowest stress tolerance levels right now. Bike lanes as they've been constructed, traffic engineering as they've been planned out, really are for higher stress. Primarily, that's the cheaper, that's the easier to implement, but that's the more mixed traffic, and that's what keeps people from riding. So what we're trying to get at in these talks is how can we really focus on some of the lower stress issues and promote those to get more types of people riding, not just on the younger end, as shown here in the graphic on the kids' bike, but ideally we like to say from 8 to 108, you should feel safe riding around the city of Cambridge. And that's where we're at. In that whole spectrum, we want to make sure that people feel comfortable and protected out there. With that, I'm going to maybe ask Adi if Lauren wants to chime in a little bit on the adaptive bike survey and the work that was happening in the back end that kind of generated a lot of the thoughts around these presentations.
Absolutely. So Lauren, do you want to introduce yourself and give a little bit of sort of like the background of why we were doing the survey and your results and
Yeah. So to reintroduce myself, my name is Lauren Compton, and this past winter I was a student intern with the Cambridge Community Development Department as part of my occupational therapy school research. And what we wanted to do was just kind of figure out ways that we could increase access to cycling for every member of the Cambridge population. And so we wanted to figure out what the barriers were that existed for both older adults, but we also looked at the population of people with disabilities. So what these surveys showed, first I want to turn your attention to the bottom chart on this slide. This was a survey conducted with the Cambridge Commission for Persons with Disabilities. It was an online survey sent out, and it kind of identified what the reasons were that people were afraid to bike or they weren't biking. And so what you can see is that the top barriers were fear of cars and motor vehicle traffic, physical ability, and not having access to a cycle that fits one's wants and needs. And this was for the population of people with disabilities, but the surveys that were conducted with older adults as well yielded similar barriers. So that was interesting. So these were kind of some topics that we used to inform what to focus on for this healthy aging program, but we also wanted to identify other ways that we could bring biking to people who needed different types of adaptive cycles. So we wanted to look at what types of cycles would be most useful to bring in if there were ever some sort of programming in the city of Cambridge. And to do that, the survey for people with disabilities listed pictures of each of the different types of bicycles. And I think that we've actually touched upon all of these types earlier with Karen. And I know Galen will be going through and showing some photos and going into more detail about the different types. But the most useful one was actually the side-by-side tandem cycle. And I think this is because um, pretty much everybody, even if they don't have any sort of ability restriction, it's nice to be able to bike with someone else. It's also really good for people who have any vision difficulties or even people with children who have disabilities. They're able to ride with their child, and that really enables access for pretty much anybody. And then the next highest was the adult tricycle, which we learned from Karen might not actually be the best option in terms of stability, but it does increase stability from a regular two-wheeled bicycle. And then the recumbent tricycle, which we also learned from Karen, might not be as low as you might think, but it is a little bit lower to the ground than an adult tricycle, and they traditionally have a bigger seat that's more supportive of people's backs. So this not only addresses balance, but it can address someone who might be worried about a regular seat in terms of pressure and comfort, but also support. And then the next is an electric assist, which we also talked about with Karen. So this could be a bicycle, but also a tricycle, depending on what you need for stability. And then last was a hand cycle. And this was the least identified. And I think it's because it really targets a very specific population of people who either prefer not to or are unable to use their legs to pedal. So the goal of this, again, the goal of the adaptive biking survey was to just identify what people in Cambridge would be interested in having. And the ultimate goal of doing this was to hopefully partner with an organization like All Out Adventures to bring cycles and have people try them out and see what they like, see what's out there, and just have like a fun day with it. But obviously with COVID, things were kind of halted. So hopefully something like that could happen in the future.
Great, thanks, Lauren. That's lovely that you're able to kind of get out in the community and see what the needs are and to have a future plan for actually implementing the research. I really am looking forward to the day when we can actually ride all together, whether it's on a three-wheeler, two-wheeler, an upright, an electric, or anything. So yeah, I'm glad that we're laying the groundwork to get us all together and learning about the different abilities and needs that are there.
I think we did have one question. Can you tell us the number of surveys this is based on?
So the older adult surveys, which the two charts don't actually show the results of, but the older adult surveys were, I think we had about 52, and I got those from the senior centers and also just at various apartment communities and events and libraries throughout the city. And then the Cambridge Commission for Persons with Disabilities, I think we got about, I think maybe 15 results. So not as much as we wanted, but there was a wide variety of responses. So I think we still got some information, good information from that.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. And I think we're hoping to continue on a yearly basis with these surveys and really try to gauge the needs of older adults around supporting cycling, and also seeing how the initiatives that we're putting forth are addressing some of the barriers and how those barriers are changing over time. So yeah, so the information in the survey is just so informative and important for us to be able to then design programming and different options for older adults. So if any of you participated in this survey, thank you very much.
Excellent. Cool. Thanks. And as Adi was mentioning, there's more to come. So we're looking to get more data. So this is maybe a step in the whole process and a crucial one. But the beauty of all of you tuning in is that now you are our captive audience, and we're going to get your feedback to better inform our data. So let's jump into types of bikes and trikes that are out there. This is a series of slides that talks about the varieties. So feel free to chime in with ones, maybe even in the chat. You could say, oh, I like that, or I'm questionable about that. And with each of these, this is not necessarily the be all end all of the categories. And then there's always a gray area. There is a continuum of types of bikes. So don't just think that there's just one set, another set, another set. There are varieties and modifications that can be made to pretty much all of these to make them adaptive for everybody's needs. I'll start with electric bikes because these are the most common. These are the ones that you can just find in any bike store for, all ages, all abilities. Electric bicycles are becoming a thing. I'll let you know that in Mass Bike, we are working on advocacy around the classification of electric bicycles to remove them from the motorized bike category so that they can remain bicycles. I touched on this briefly in prior presentations, but the idea is that if you are riding and pedaling and the motor kicks on while you're pedaling, that's called a pedal assist. And those are the most common. Those are the ones that you see mostly out there, and those still require you to be pedaling with the pedaling motion. Those are the ones I'd recommend for folks who are just needing a little bit of a boost to get over the hills, to go the little longer distance along those lines. For the throttle assist, those are ones that are almost like there's like a trigger and you push it down. You don't need to pedal. That's a different category of electric bicycle, but those are also fine. They mostly top out around 20 miles an hour or less in order to be considered bicycles. Anything beyond 20 miles an hour probably become RMV regulated along the moped or the scooter category. So in order to keep it a bicycle, it's got to be a lower speed and a lower wattage. But the difference really is between pedal assist, where you have to be pedaling, or the throttle assist, where you do have a little bit of a throttle. So it's more of a scooter, but still lower speed, handles like a bike, fits like a bike. So it's really considered a bicycle. And then there's a top speed of 27 miles an hour category, which is also a pedal assist. Those would not be for bike paths. I wouldn't recommend. Anything that goes beyond 20 miles an hour would really just be made for the streets. So that's something to keep in mind if you're thinking about purchasing or trying out an electric bicycle. If you want to be considered a bike and stay on the pathways, it's going to have to be the lower speed and probably the pedal assist, so that's most similar to a bicycle. However, Mass Bike's advocacy is still in process, so we have yet to really set ourselves as to what the categories will be codified in law. So it's still an evolving conversation involving advocacy. So if that's something you're interested in plugging into on an advocacy stand front, get in touch with Mass Bike. We'd be happy to hear your concerns and plug you into the work and the efficacy of the campaign. Pricing of these, the price ranges are coming down pretty considerably these days. Lithium batteries are becoming much cheaper. The motors themselves are becoming cheaper as well. Around $500 is a starting point. I would recommend thinking and being ready for around $1,000 if you're really looking for something with a German Bosch motor or a battery that is kind of a standard modern battery. However, for those who are price conscious, this is a wonderful way to replace car trips, replace MBTA trips. So this actually might be a cost saver if you're thinking about investing in an electric bicycle, because you can actually go the distance, which you might be prohibited if it was a normal bike. And then also, because these are so standard, you could pretty much walk into any bike shop and test ride some electric bicycles if you feel comfortable doing so. So you won't even necessarily have to wait for a program like All Out Adventures or from the Cambridge Development Department. You can actually kind of go test ride an electric bike these days if you're so inclined. But that's something to think about moving forward. Electric trikes, these are, as we were mentioning, the 3-wheel versus 2-wheel. These are certainly an enhancement for balance. For those of you who have balance concerns, electric tricycles are a wonderful opportunity to get out. It's just the same as an electric bike where there's the pedal assist and the throttle assist. However, these would not be considered bicycles. These would have to be their own, what they'd be called low speed electric vehicle, which doesn't necessarily mean you have to register it with the RMV, but it might keep you prohibited from being on certain bike paths unless you actually have disability status, in which case the ADA will allow you to ride pretty much anywhere. So don't worry about that, but it's just a consideration. Typically, these are great for cargo. These are great for storage capacity, going to the store. And similarly to like a normal 2-wheel electric bike, throttle or pedal assist, just to get over the hills, just to go those longer distances. Of course, these are much pricier. A good quality one can start a little bit more expensive than the 2-wheel bike. And but then again, if it's, again, for mobility purposes and can replace a car and other trips, might be a cost-saving tip. And I should also mention that one of the advocacy points we're working on at Mass Bike is to get an electric bicycle rebate. So if you buy an electric bicycle, there might be the opportunity, if we're successful, where the Commonwealth will actually reimburse you for some of that cost. And we're partnering with the councils on aging to maybe make this a thing as well, even before the state legislator gets to act. So just a little bit of background there on some of the pricing action. But electric trikes, just to get back to that, really, they're just wonderful because they are, they're easy to balance. Folding bikes. Folding bikes are, as mentioned before, these are kind of the bring anywhere, do everything bike. They are great because you can fold them up and put them in a trunk of a car. You can always bring them on a bus, on a train. There's no limitations as to where and when you can bring these on mass transit. They fold up to be about the size of a large suitcase or so, depending on the variety. There's a huge range, I would say, in terms of pricing. You can get in a folding bike for around $300 to start. But the varieties go based on the numbers of gears that you have. If you want to, get up some hills, you want gear options based off weight, based off folding mechanism. So I would recommend, if you're interested in getting a folding bike, to really do some research and try a few out to know what's good and what you're actually looking for. The beauty of the folding bike around Cambridge, though, is that you can take it on the transit. We have a photo here of a gentleman walking on the Green Line, the folding bike. This is the only type of bicycle allowed on the Green Line, for instance. So just to keep in mind, there are certain limitations on taking bikes on trains, on buses, especially if you're on a tricycle. You really can't bring it on public transit. Folding bikes take that out of the equation. You can take them anywhere. And then here's a photo of a gentleman who's actually riding at the Grand Canyon on a folding bike. I've seen people and met people who have actually toured across country on folding bikes. So though they may look like circus bikes, and you may feel that the smaller wheels are more, maybe a little bit more wobbly, with the right handling, with the right experience, I've known people who've actually ridden across the Rockies, and not young folks, but folks of older generations have been able to ride across country on folding bikes, depending on the quality, depending on the gear. So just something to keep in mind there. A recumbent trike. So we mentioned this a little bit with Karen at All Out Adventures. The recumbent nature really means that you are seated back. I have some photos of other trikes in a second, but I want to focus on recumbent trikes because this is really what Karen was mentioning in terms of the stability and the increase of ability for getting folks who have balance issues, getting them out and riding. A couple of things about the recumbent trike, though, is that you are lower to the ground. So having the flags, as Karen was mentioning, for riding in traffic was a super crucial point. They're very comfortable. It's basically like you're seated and you take the strain off the spine. So you don't really need to strain your muscles to lift yourself up. It's adaptable as well. I have two varieties here. I have the 2-wheel in the front and the 2-wheel in the back. 2-wheel in the front, we call it the tadpole style. So really is personal preference. You can pedal these with your foot, or in the bottom image, you can actually have a hand cycle in case you have leg mobility issues. These are great for people who have maybe lost limbs. So, I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with the hand cycles that are part of the Boston Marathon. That's a whole emerging field of getting out and riding. But this is a great opportunity to think about, oh, if I have balancing issues or if I have leg mobility issues, well, there are workarounds for that. Now, arguably, these are pricier because of the engineering involved and the quality of the frame and the quality of the componentry. These definitely start around $1,500. So it is an investment. However, if that's something that you might be able to afford, or might be something that could be something in installments, or however, depending on your financial needs, or if you just want to try it out for free through the Department of Conservation and Recreation and All Out Adventures, recumbent trikes are fantastic that All Out Adventures offers as well. This is the semi-recumbent trike. This is different than the recumbent trike because, as Karen was mentioning, this is a little bit more of this seated position. The seats themselves on a lot of these, as she said, was very similar to the height of a toilet. So if you can get on and off a standard toilet, you can get on and off a standard semi-recumbent trike. These have the added benefit of all trikes of having the 3 wheels, so they're very stable. Usually there's some cargo capacity, some baskets, some racks, not shown in this picture, but this picture is a little bit more of the adaptive style. There's a ton of different varieties here. Costs can start as small or as low as around $150, $200, $300 to start. However, to get a variety as the one shown here, it's probably on the upper hundreds, probably close to $1,000. And a lot of that depends on the componentry. You can see the steering on this style here is much more adaptive. So there's a little bit more componentry there. It's a lighter weight frame material. So just, there's a wide variety. They started around 150 and they could go all the way to 1,500 or 2,000 or more, depending on the quality and the manufacturer. But this is a great starting point for a lot of folks because different than the recumbent trike where people feel a little bit more vulnerable being lower to the ground, the semi-recumbent trike keep people spines up and keeps their head up. So you're much more tuned in at the height, but it takes the balance issues out of the equation. Now, these could be made electric. These could be made standard. Of course, if you do make these electric, their price range goes up and the weight goes up, but it's some trade-offs that you have here. And these are becoming much more popular and familiar, especially with the adaptive style here. And one thing I'll note about this image is that the straps on the pedals are for folks with mobility issues. This young woman has a seatbelt to keep her in. Not sure the circumstance, maybe she's battling Parkinson's or some other tremor-oriented mobility concern, but this is a good way to remain in the machine. And then there's the handle on the back for a third party, a helper to help push her along that also has a brake on it as well. So the cool thing about some of these adaptive bikes and trikes is that it's not just solely the person pedaling or the person who's in the control seat, but there's an ability for somebody to assist and help out as needed depending on the bike. So that's something to think about, that All Out Adventures has a lot of opportunities there too. And most of these images actually come from All Out Adventures' site. Cool. Then there's the semi-recumbent two-wheeler. So not the tricycle, but the two-wheeler. This is actually a really cool modification. It looks and rides and handles like a standard two-wheeler bike. So it's faster, you would lean and steer to do your mobility and your turns. But the cool thing about this is that if you're okay with balance, a lot of these semi-recumbent two-wheelers have the ability to have a modified seat that has a back. So you can allow you to kind of lean back, keep your spine upright, keep the strain off your neck, and give you a full mobility range of vision at, essentially even above a normal rider level height. You can have modifications to the pedals, to the cranks, to fit any leg concerns. We can talk about that in a second. But ideally, I think the beauty of the semi-recumbent trike is it takes strain off the spine and the neck. And then, on the tricycles, there's a lot of drag. There's a lot of added weight. There's a lot of inefficiencies that come with 3 wheels. But if you go back to 2 wheels, these are pretty much just as efficient as a standard bike. And if you're taking a little bit of that balance, if you're okay with a little bit of the balance, then something like a semi-recumbent two-wheeler might be something to think about, which is also offered by All Out Adventures. Cool. And moving on, we'll talk a little bit about a traditional tandem. So along with the 3-wheeled tandems, which I'll talk about in a second, the 2-wheel tandems are great because it's 2 sets of leg power and you can go twice as far. It's twice the weight, but it pays off with the momentum. And these are pretty funny in terms that we call them either the divorce maker or the marriage binder, depending on who you're riding with. The trouble with tandem bikes is that there's always somebody in the front who's steering and braking, and there's always somebody in the back whose job it is to pedal, what we call the stoker. So depending on your relationship with your partner or whomever the rider is, You can either be the steerer and breaker, or you could be the stoker. And hopefully you've gotten over the battles of, oh, well, who's going to put some leg energy and who's going to pedal. You can also make these electric. So the top image here is an electric tandem, which takes a little bit of the force away from the rear stoker. Typically, they have to have a single drivetrain, and by that I mean that the pedals have to be moving at the same rate, at the same speed, at the same time. If the front set of pedals is moving, the back set of pedals has to be moving as well. So that takes coordination, that takes communication, and that takes both riders being on the same page. These can be lower end, starting around $400 or $500. However, if you go up into the lighter weight frames and the metals, if you add the electric assist, price ranges can go all the way up into the thousands, the multi-thousands dollars. But just a standard beach cruiser tandem bike, you can get for about $400 new. If you're just riding on the bike paths, this is a great way that if you have somebody you're riding with who has some limited mobility, or vice versa, that you're kind of sharing the work. So it's not all just on a single person. And like I say, there's a lot of communication and coordination involved, but tandems are really fun because you can actually go farther than you would probably on your own, and you've always got a riding buddy with you. Talk a little bit about the tandem recumbents. Similarly to the styles of a tandem regular, the tandem recumbent is just when you're leaned back. Now, typically these would not be hand cycles. These would probably standard be foot pedals. Same deal with the single drivetrain, same deal with somebody in the front steering and braking, and same deal with somebody in the back, typically being the force of the stoking, of the pedaling, although both sets pedal, of course. These are definitely pricier. This style here is called the tadpole, where it's two wheels in the front. You could get the reverse, although most common is two wheels in the front for steering purposes. Price ranges are, around $1,500 and up. I just quoted here as a loose one around $1,800. You might be able to find these used if price is a concern. There's a lot of different companies out there that specialize in making custom versions of tandem recumbents, which Adi and I and Lauren can maybe share after the fact. We can point you to some online resources if you want to do some comparative shopping. But this is a wonderful resource if balance is going to be a problem. And if you have a concern about a single person's mobility concerns, this allows support, but you're also both riding. So you can really both get out there and pedal. And that's the tandem recumbent. Similar to the tandem, it's just that you're leaned back. And then lastly, we'll talk about the tandem side by side, which is cool. The tandem side by side is probably the most attractive out there. This would be something that would generally not be used on bike paths. This would be something that would be used on roadways that are closed down, slow streets or quiet streets. This is next to each other as opposed to front and rear. Both riders are pedaling with the same efficiency. Both pedalers are steering collectively together. Typically, these would come with an electric assist because these are heavy machines and it's twice the weight, but yet you'll see that because it's three wheels, it's less efficient. And these would typically be much pricier at the starting range. Tandem side-by-sides, especially a quality like this, would start around $2,000. So it's not a cheap alternative. But the cool thing is that through programs like All Out Adventures, through the Department of Conservation and Recreation, you can have opportunities to participate in programs at no cost. So you can still get out and ride, even if you don't have the ability to have to purchase them yourself. And these are the most attractive, based off Lauren's survey for the most part, I think, because both partners are riding kind of as a pair, as opposed to one being in front, one being in the rear. And the stability concerns are out the window because you're three wheels. And if they're electric assist, whether they're throttle or pedal or both, you can actually get a little bit more oomph behind it. So to get over the hills and to go over longer distances. So just to recap, there's a lot of different varieties of these bikes. I'm just going to fly through them one more time just so that, because I know that there's a lot. You have normal e-bikes, just a standard bike with electric assist. You can get a tricycle with an electric assist. You could get a folding bike could be electric, but mostly they're regular standard bikes. It's kind of hard to get an electric folding bike these days based off the mechanisms, but they are out there. You can get recumbent tricycles that take the balance out of the equation. It could be a hand-driven cycle as well. You get the semi-recumbent trike, just normal. So you're kind of partway leaned back, but not necessarily all the way leaned back like a recumbent. You got the recumbent two-wheeler, or the semi-recumbent two-wheeler, I should say, so that you have a little bit of back support, but you have the efficiency of riding a two-wheel bike. You can get a tandem bike where you're riding with a partner. Could be electric, could be normal. And that's really nice because you're riding as a pair. Then you'll get the tandem recumbent, which has the benefits of being lean back, leaning more comfortable, and then the side by side. So a lot to throw at you as options. And I know that it might have been a little bit overwhelming, but hopefully this provides a little bit of the opportunities that are out there for you to start riding, and to let you know that there are options to get you riding. I'll take a quick pause before I jump into some partner organizations, but Adi, is there anything else that, or Lauren, anything else that you want to bring up that might come in through the chat?
We do have one question. Is it possible to add back support to a standard two-wheel bike?
Yeah, a lot of that would depend on, I would say probably yes. You'd have to purchase the seat special. And this version almost is the exact same as a two-wheel bike. The modifications you would see besides the seat are the handlebars are kind of like chopper style handlebars that are tilted back a little bit. But those handlebars could be on any bike, and that could be a normal looking bike if it had a different style seat. So I'd say the only real modifications that I would see on here would be the handlebars and the seat. So I would say yes. The short answer is that seat could probably be modified on any two-wheel bike. And maybe we could do a little bit of research and recon to suggest places to go look, or your local bike shop, depending on where you are in Cambridge. I might recommend checking out Bicycle Bell for a variety of options. They're up by Porter Square, but really most bike shops would have access to being able to order. And I recommend going through a bike shop if possible, because if it doesn't work for your bike, you can always return it, which is not always the case if you're purchasing off Amazon or from a third party. So it's always good to have a mechanic and a salesperson to back up your purchase if you're going to be modifying a bike. We mentioned this earlier, but I didn't dive into these slides yet, but there's a variety of standard bikes. I'm not going to talk about these really, but just so you know that the terminology, and again, it's a sliding scale. It's definitely a continuum, but commuter bikes that generally have you upright, they're a little heavier, multi-gear for getting around town. Road bikes are lighter weight. These are skinnier tires made for speed, efficiency, and distance. They have the body geometry more leaned over, which takes strain off the spine, but might add some strain to the neck and shoulders. Different styles of riding, different types. Mountain bikes, for getting out in the woods, wider tires, knobbier tires, a little bit more cushions, with maybe some suspension. Less efficient, but probably more comfortable. Maybe perhaps more stable as well. Cargo bikes and cargo trailers. This is a slide I poached from my family riding clinics. This is like the modern minivan that you'll see, not necessarily geared specifically for older folks, but definitely geared for folks who have cargo, kids, kitty litter, and varieties. You can do a front basket, a rear, or even just add a trailer to modify a standard bike. And then I'll pause on this slide for a minute to showcase some modifications that can be made. We talked about this a little bit in the third presentation about modifications to your bike, but ergonomic grips, so take some strain off your wrist, are really key, especially if you have concerns about being able to brake, steer, and shift that all happen at the handlebar level, that you're actually able to make it comfortable for you. Ergonomic pedals, wider, bigger pedals, so maybe it's easier to get your foot on there. And you'll see that this ergonomic pedal here in the middle actually has a little bit of traction on it. It's got a little sticky pad that helps your foot stay in place. And then that on the right, those are blocks that can be added to pedals. So if you can think of a pedal stroke as like the pedals going up and down, if you have mobility issues with the hip, with the ankle, with the knee, adding blocks to your pedals might mean that you have less of a motion that's required for your foot to go in order to get your pedal, which might be an easy modification. Just throw them on your pedals, and it might be easier to reach your pedals without having to lower the seat. Or the top image there, this woman actually just has adult-sized training wheels, which makes her less efficient for the ride, but it does prevent those balancing issues. And these are just simple modifications that can be made. I would say you could purchase those for about between $50 or $100 to get them to modify onto pretty much any standard bike. There might be like a rear rack that needs to be added in order to have like a point of contact for the bike for these training wheels. But another thing I'll mention about this one image at the top is that the woman riding, her tires are fatter, which might help with the stability as well. So one thing to think about, and I just went through the types of bikes here: commuter bikes, road bikes, mountain bikes. One of the bigger differences is the width of tires. And so you might think about getting a wider tired bike if your wheels can stand it, or as wide as your wheels can take. And a bike shop can help you out by letting you know how wide your ability is there. But that might help with a little bit of stability. Might make you less efficient when you're riding. But if you're not riding 50 miles in the North Shore or like entering into a speed race, not a big deal. If you just want to get around Cambridge, having these modifications might slow you down, but that actually might not be a bad thing if you're out there riding in the streets. Well, just to fly through, just to round up this presentation, because I realize we're pretty much at time, just a few partner organizations that are out there. I might end in a second by showing you this video of Cycling Without Age. We'll see if it works. It might work, it might not work. But this is a cool program. This is basically a franchise-based nonprofit that started in the Netherlands with the concept of providing electric front-loading rickshaws, in a sense, or tricycles that have seats in the front, where the rear pilot is the peddler and the front passengers are just along for the ride. And Cycling Without Age partners with elderly communities, nursing homes, older adult communities throughout the world to provide these electric tricycles and then the training for volunteers and pilots. So I'm going to make this pitch. If you are somebody who's able-bodied and want to volunteer as a pilot, this is actually a wonderful way to connect with your community, because you can actually get engaged in an intergenerational conversation that help people who might otherwise be isolated in their housing situations, help them get out and experience the world. Or if you're somebody who has mobility concerns or knows somebody who does, this is a great way to encourage them to become a passenger, to really go out. And this is not really made for errands, although that could be, a way to go to the pharmacy or however. But this is really for recreation, to go out and explore your parks, explore nature, and get out. It's called Cycling Without Age. And Mass Bike and an organization called Common Wheels, also in Alston and Brighton, helped establish an affiliate in Brighton, Mass, with the Two Life Communities nursing and older adults home up in Brighton, up by Brighton Center. So there is actually one of these, we call it a tri-shaw, basically a tricycle rickshaw. There is an organization out in Brighton that operates out of the Two Life Communities. And it's up by Cleveland Circle and the Reservoir. So what we do is encourage volunteers to sign up to be pilots. We have like a sign up list from the folks in the community, and this allows people to ride around. And typically the route goes around the Chestnut Hill Reservoir, and it takes people who might otherwise feel isolated because they can't drive anymore, public transit doesn't serve them, and it doesn't get to their recreation facilities. It really helps people get out in the community, feel the wind through the hair. And what I like the best is that if you have a younger pilot working with older adults as passengers, it really creates that intergenerational conversation, which in my opinion is the real growth of the cycling community. So that's Cycling Without Age. We talked about All Out Adventures. We'll share Karen's email and All Out Adventures' website after the fact here, and we encourage you to sign up for their mailing list so you can know when their programs are happening, because I guarantee they will happen after COVID. And then the DCR Adaptive Bike, and frankly, the whole Universal Access Program, the Department of Conservation and Recreation. This is a tax-funded state-level resource, so highly recommend that you get involved here. DCR partners with All Out Adventures for the cycling, but there's a lot more that the DCR does. They offer specialized recreation to use at beaches, at skating rinks, and park pathways, and the parks all across the state. You'll see here in the bottom image on the left, they have these wonderful kind of like moon rover wheelchairs for getting out in the ocean, which I've personally taken advantage of with my own grandmother. We've been able to take her out to the ocean well past her ability to walk on the beach. We were able to kind of cart her out there, which was awesome for her to get out on the beach. There's also adaptive ways of engaging with the golf courses. Don't have the image up here, but there's some really cool mobility devices that actually allow people who might not even be able to walk to get out on a golf course, to get them positioned enough so they can still take golf swings out on these state-run golf courses, which is just great just to get out in the parks. And then, of course, with the adaptive cycling program, the bottom image here is from All Out Adventures, is partnering with the DCR. You'll see here that this is kind of the partnership, the dual tandem recumbent. So this is the design that I was mentioning earlier that makes it really easy to balance. That means that you're not pedaling alone, you've got an assist there. This is great for folks with mobility concerns. Even without mobility concerns, this is great because it partners up people and gets them riding. And if you're plugged in with the Universal Access Program and with All Out Adventures, you'll know when this is coming to Brighton, which is honestly, it's just across the river in Brighton, Massachusetts by Herder Park. And it's for free. All of this, the adaptive bike program and all the Universal Access Program is at no cost, offered by the DCR, but you do have to figure out the schedule and signing up for it. But just so you know, this is just a taste of the resources that are out there, and there is probably much more to come. But these the three that I've partnered with personally with Mass Bike. So yeah, so you're not alone out there. And with that, I think I'll kind of leave my presentation here, and I'll leave my final slide up. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Adi, and say that it's been really wonderful to be here for these past 5 sessions. I hope that because this is a start of what we've been building here with Mass Bike and the CDD, that we're able to engage you all in the spring and beyond. I'm here whenever, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to help you get riding. I'm also here to listen to your riding concerns because that helps my advocacy, helps our programs, helps where we allocate our state resources and our funding and our partnerships. So please, please, please stay in touch with Mass Bike. Please, please, please stay in touch with the CDD. This is, again, a start of our programs working with older adults, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to present.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Galen. So I just really want to thank Mass Bike for co-hosting this series. We're so happy to be able to have this healthy aging and cycling series. We're so excited to do more. And yeah, thank you so much to Lauren. She was really, you know, an important player in designing the series and getting the responses, the survey responses from people to know that, you know, education around cycling for older adults is something that the older adult community is interested in. And we're looking forward to coming up with more programs and more opportunities to work with you all. So stay tuned. We definitely will have more programming for older adults coming up. I know we've already tossed around the idea of having a bike fit clinic for older adults at a bike workshop, at a bike shop. And we'll hopefully be having some bike rides and a ride series once these, you know, hopefully this spring if the pandemic subsides by then. And yeah, thank you all so much. It's been awesome having you on board for these last 5 weeks. So yeah, unless Galen or Lauren, you have anything to say, I'm going to turn off the recording and then we'll open it up to a little Q&A.
Yeah, I might answer just one quick question to make sure this remains in the recording as well.
Yeah.
We had a question about riding around the pathway around Fresh Pond. And the concerns, are cyclists allowed, are people on bike not allowed? People on bikes are allowed and encouraged to ride around the gravelish area, the stone dust area around Fresh Pond. Just keep in mind that it's a shared pathway, so you're going to be there with dog walkers, kids, young kids, people learning how to ride a bike as well. So if you do take your bike out there, you're more than welcome to, you are encouraged to ride around the pond, just ride slowly. There's also an adjacent paved bike path right next to Fresh Pond that goes along Fresh Pond, along Route 16 and Huron Parkway. So if you want to go a little bit faster, you can stay on the paved portion, or if you want to do the loop in the recreation, you are more than welcome to ride there. And I also want to make a pitch that the DCR is finishing up, hopefully next season, next spring, the connected pathway that would take you from Fresh Pond directly to Watertown to the Arsenal Mall, which would take you to the Charles River pathway. So not only from West Cambridge can you get around Fresh Pond, but it's under construction now. So hopefully they can get the construction going, but you'll be able to ride completely off-road to the Charles River from Fresh Pond and then access what's called the Blue Heron pathway along the Charles River. So I'm really encouraged by the coordination that Cambridge, Watertown, the state, the city of Boston, all the regional players are having around building safe and accessible routes for really everybody to feel like they can ride, especially new riders, especially older adults, for both recreation and transportation. So great question. And for more tips on where to ride, Adi and myself, we are great resources to say, hey, this is an awesome path. You should check it out. But yeah, Fresh Pond, especially if you're in West Cambridge, is like top of my list. I would say in East Cambridge, North Point Park is my favorite. If you can get to North Point Park by the Education First area, there's something called a traffic garden, and that's like a little pathway that kind of is made for kids to learn how to get familiar with traffic markings on the pathway, even though it's a pathway. That's a wonderful one. And then, of course, all along Cambridge Port with the Charles River pathway. And there's just a plethora of connections that'll take you to the Minuteman and beyond, especially as we start to build our pathway infrastructure. So we are fully encouraging you to utilize the off-road network wherever is best and comfortable for you. And say once again, thanks. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you.